Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Duncan, and today I'm joined in by a lovely lady who holds many hats, Councillor Fatima Zahra Joji. She represents West Hill and District Ward. She's also the first and only woman to be elected of the black minority ethnic group in the Aberdeenshire Council. She's also the deputy spokesperson for communities. Hello, Fatima, and welcome.
Hi, thank you. It's lovely to be back after a while.
really,
For
really nice to have you today.
Thank
All right.
you.
Yeah, right. We'll go right to Ukraine update, day 237. Nearly a third of Ukraine's power stations have been destroyed by Russia's drone and missile attacks in the past 8 days, President Volodymyr Zelensky has said, as his office warned of critical power situation nationwide. Krolo Timoshenko, the deputy head of the presidential office, said energy infrastructure and power supply were targeted overnight in an eastern district of Kyiv, where 2 people were killed, and in the cities of Dnipro and Zhytomyr. 2 objects of critical infrastructure were damaged in Kyiv, said the city's mayor Vitaly Klitschko. An electricity and water supply in many houses in West Kyiv was partially limited. The mayor appealed to the residents to conserve electricity and said houses experiencing reduced water pressure should use water as economically as possible. All of Zhytomyr was without electricity and water after a double missile strike on an energy facility, said the mayor Sahi Sukomilin. Hospitals were running on backup power, he said. The German ambassador to UK, Miguel Berger, has called for sanctions against Iran over the allegations to country has supplied weaponry to Russia, a claim Tehran denies. Ukraine's foreign minister Dmytro Kuleba has announced he is submitting a proposal to the president's office to cut diplomatic ties with Iran. The US warned on Monday it would take action against companies and nations working with Iran's drones program after claiming Russia used the imports for deadly kamikaze strike in Kyiv. Ole Sinehubov, governor of Kharkiv, said Tuesday at around 8:30 a.m. the enemy launched 8 rockets at Kharkiv from Russia's city of Belgorod, but there were no casualties. UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has hastily cancelled an early afternoon appearance before the Commons Defence Committee for an urgent trip to Washington, D.C., prompting speculations as to the purpose of the sudden visit. Preliminary investigations of damages on the 2 Nord Stream gas pipelines in the Danish part of Baltic Sea show that the leaks were caused by powerful explosions, Copenhagen police said in a statement. Germany's Interior Minister Nancy Faeser has sacked the country's cybersecurity chief following allegations he had turned a blind eye to a firm with links to Russian security circles. A Russian military jet crashed Monday into a residential building in Yeysk shortly after taking off near the border with Ukraine, sparking a major fire that has left at least 13 people dead, including 3 children. Liz Truss refuses to commit to maintaining the pensions triple lock. Liz Truss could abandon the state pension triple lock to help plug the fiscal black hole after her disastrous mini budget, leaving more than 12 million pensioners facing a real-time cut in their income in April. The Prime Minister's official spokesperson refused 4 times to commit to keeping the pensions guarantee, despite it being a key 2019 manifesto commitment that Truss confirmed she would stick with it just 2 weeks ago. In contrast, Truss backed off a plan to scrap the government's commitment to raise defense spending to 3% of GDP by 2030 after the Defense Minister Ben Wallace and James Harper threatened to quit. The Prime Minister told her cabinet on Tuesday there were difficult decisions ahead of where the spending cuts would fall in a 90-minute meeting from which ministers emerged grim-faced. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has asked all cabinet ministers to come up with plans for departmental cuts to be submitted to the Office for Budget Responsibility as he tries to balance the books ahead of the Halloween fiscal statement. Commenting, the SNP's Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, Kirsty Blackman, MP, said, in 2014, pensioners in Scotland were told the only way they could protect their pension was with a no vote. 8 years on, and now every pension in the country is under threat with the Tories. Disgraceful U-turn on a triple lock. It has become crystal clear that only independence can protect pensioners from the callousness of this Conservative Party and Tory austerity 2.0. This is a sweeping betrayal to over 12 million pensioners who were guaranteed in the Tories' manifesto to see a continuation of the triple lock in this parliamentary term, another broken Tory promise. Under the Westminster Tories, UK pensioners already receive one of the lowest pensions in all the Northern Europe by comparison with their average wage. Engaging you, Fatima, on this issue, not very pleasant, but, looking at this story today, the question of pension seems to remain whether Scotland stays in the UK or leaves.
I think you mentioned a very important point earlier on about what the No campaign said about our pensions, that if we voted to remain in the UK, that our pensions would be protected. Scotland, sadly, many were misled. Many that I've spoken to were misled about the about the arguments for better together. They were led to believe that things would be better together. And of course, now they're seeing this U-turn, as you've mentioned. They're seeing these broken promises. Our pensions have been consistently under threat in this union as opposed to being protected in Scotland. And we only need the full powers to be able to protect this, which we can get with independence. Now, the issue with Liz Truss U-turning on this is that this was a manifesto commitment in 2019 by the current Conservatives that they would commit to protecting this pension triple lock. It was in their 2019 manifesto. So it's another case of a broken promise. Liz Truss, only a few weeks earlier, reiterated her stance that she would protect it, but has gone through another U-turn. There's so many U-turns. I mean, it's okay in politics for sometimes you get it wrong, but they're getting too many things wrong. They're getting too many things drastically wrong, and it's having severe negative consequences on everyone. And you get to the point when you say, how much are they actually listening or thinking about what they're doing for the masses, or how much are they listening and thinking about what they're doing for themselves? That's the question that we need to ask when these situations happen.
So, and what do you think the Scottish people who are at the fence, should take from this one?
It's very clear. I mean, Scotland's stance on protecting pensions has been consistent. Our leadership has been consistent. Nicola Sturgeon has seen how many prime ministers, how many Conservative prime ministers thrown out of office literally because of their disastrous policies and work. So I think they can take reassurance in the fact that Nicola Sturgeon has been the only constant here, and her policies have rung true. Our manifesto's commitments have rung true. They've been upheld in most of the circumstances. So I think they can take reassurance on how we lead, how Scotland leads, how the First Minister leads, that she is not about to break any promises. I mean, the attitude we have towards the working class and those in poverty is severely, drastically different than what the Conservatives have. It's very clear that in their policies they favour those who are well off, who are rich, the 1%, as opposed to the majority who are finding themselves being hit by the cost of living crisis and would be adversely impacted by the pension crisis. So you also need to think about the priorities of governments that we elect. And we've consistently elected governments with a priority for the majority and not the minority, unlike the Conservatives.
Right. Moving on to SNP one or rising energy bills after UK government U-turn on energy price cap. The SNP has warned struggling households could face bills of up to £5,000 next April after the UK government U-turned and scrapped the protection offered to families on the energy price cap. Labour abstained in a vote on an amendment proposed by the SNP, which would have maintained the price cap for the original 2 year period. In scrapping the majority of the proposals contained in the former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng's financial statement, the new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, announced a scaling back of the energy price cap freeze, which will now last for only 6 months instead of the 2 years initially promised. The SNP's energy spokesperson, Alan Brown MP, branded the decision reckless, warning households face massive energy bill rises again in April 2023. The Kilmarnock and London MP accused the Labour Party of failing to offer any real opposition after their failure to vote against the changes. Commenting, Alan Brown MP said, "It can be in no doubt that Scots who are paying a heavy price for Westminster's failures would be better off with the full power of independence." The UK government were forced to roll back heavily on its proposals that crushed the UK economy. And with it, they recklessly removed the very little protection they offered to households through what is said to be an ever-worsening cost of living crisis the Tories have failed to get a grip of. What's worse is that given a chance to stand up for struggling households, the Labour Party once again sat on its hands and refused to offer up real opposition, leaving families in the firing line. There is little difference between the Conservative and Labour parties these days. Fatima, you heard what the MP has said there. He expected more support to stop this cap, but again, on this U-turn, it continues.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've had the technical gremlins attack me, so I've missed a bit of what you've said, but
Yeah,
I absolutely know about the story you've been talking about. I've been
yeah,
watching it, so I believe you're speaking about the cost of living crisis and the Labour stance on this.
yes.
Um, so, okay, fantastic. Well, I mean, up and down the country, we have been watching Labour coalitions with right-wing parties opposite of their stance, which makes absolutely no sense. So in a way, it does not come as a shock that they're replicating this in Parliament by voting against their political ideologies and leanings. But at the same time, it's rather disappointing because I feel for the Labour voters in particular, because what they're getting is not Labour policies and Labour leadership at all. And simply voting against something that is in line with their values, in line with their policies, and will essentially help the people, voting against it does nothing but suggest that they will only do so because of who is proposing it, when in fact they need to also think about the people that it will help and support, which is in line with their policies. So, to be honest, I feel looking at Labour now, Labour as we knew it no longer exists anymore, in my opinion. It's a real devastating consequence to see the way they have been voting on the cost of living crisis, and I can only hope that they make sense and see in future the impact of their decisions. And hopefully, I don't want to say U-turn because a lot of U-turns are happening, but in this case, this U-turn would be good.
So, and I have a question. So, do you think Jeremy Hunt's plan is looking out for the future economy, so as to cover for what was not covered? You know, during the mini budget, people were asking, "Where's this money coming from? You know, where's the money gonna come from to pay for the 2 years worth of whatever debt will have accumulated?" But now he's saying it is 6 months cover and that's it. So do you think he's just looking out for, and what are your thoughts?
Well, in the first instance, you're asking me about someone who, as health minister, completely and utterly destroyed financial opportunities and stability for junior doctors. He is someone who has absolutely had a negative impact on the National Health Service in England. So you're asking me about someone with those models, first of all. So when it comes to deciding his stance on the economy, I am not assured. And with Conservative policies, I am 100% not assured that we will see any progress or much improvement from what we have seen previously from the mini budget, which I need to remind everyone, Scotland was under a lot of pressure to copy, and thankfully we did not. So I am not confident that Jeremy Hunt, considering his past actions and his present rhetoric and his views that he has made very clear, would address the devastating consequences that have happened, because obviously now we're in survival mode. It's more of he's cleaning up messes just now, and I don't think he has what it takes to actually do a very good job with his views and his actions and where he stands in terms of policies.
All right, okay, moving on. EU proposes to cap excessive and volatile gas prices this winter. The EU has proposed to cap on excessive and volatile gas prices this winter as part of a package to protect consumers. Brussels has put forward a new mechanism to control prices by blocking transactions above a certain level, which can be triggered when needed. European policymakers are attempting to insulate households from the worst of the impact from Russia's invasion to Ukraine, which has sent wholesale gas prices soaring. The package of measures agreed by the EU commissioners on Sunday and announced on Tuesday include emergency regulations to allow joint gas buying across the EU, to negotiate better prices, and provision to permit greater cooperation between countries in a gas supply emergency. EU leaders will discuss the proposals at a summit this week, and if approved, the cap could come into force this winter. The European Commission has devised the plan to create a new benchmark for gas prices to better reflect the price of liquefied natural gas and delink prices from the main European gas exchange, the Title Transfer Facility (TTF) Dutch gas hub. However, this scheme is expected to take time to implement, so the options to put a cap on price will be introduced in the interim. It will block transitions from taking place on the TTF at a price higher than the dynamic price limit. Gas is trading at more than 200% higher than this time last year on the TTF exchange after Russia slashed gas supplies into Europe in response to sanctions against the Kremlin. The Commission is also proposing to support energy traders who could be exposed to volatile prices in an echo of support devised by the Treasury and the Bank of England in the UK. The Commission's president, Ursula von der Leyen, said Russia's war on Ukraine has severe consequences on global and European energy markets. We act in unity and have prepared well for the winter ahead, filling our gas storages, saving energy, and finding new suppliers. Now we can tackle excessive and volatile prices with more security. She added that investment in renewables and infrastructure must be accelerated. On Fatima, on this on this piece, I feel like the European countries are trying to cover their own people and to protect them against the rising cost of energy.
I mean, that would be the logical and right thing to do. You would expect in the UK as well. I mean, as part of the European Union, we could have been part of this important discussion. But we're being led by a government who have made it very clear what their priorities and interests are when it comes to energy prices and caps on energy as well. Already, the windfall tax, which was proposed earlier by the opposition groups, would have had a significant positive benefit on many people struggling during, especially in the lead up to the winter months now, particularly, and during the winter. It would have had significant benefits, but I mean, to protect the interests of the rich oil people and anyone involved in the energy sector, they decided against the windfall tax. And the windfall tax is not to tax money; it's money that they already forecast, that they made a forecast that they would have, is to tax excess profits that they would have made. Even that they did not want to do. So I think it's just indicative of the sort of mindset and perceptions and policies that they have, the Conservatives have, the narrow vision they have, and the wants and needs of the people in Scotland and the rest of the UK as well, if I may add, because it's impacting many, many people up and down the country. So it's such a I wanted to say sorry situation, but I wouldn't use that language. But it's honestly, it's such a serious issue where we could have been party to these discussions that are happening in the European Union, but due to the ramifications of Brexit, we're finding ourselves in a situation where we're being severely impacted by the cost of living crisis and by these energy prices as well, by virtue of being out of the European Union. So I'll say it again, it's a sorry state of affairs for us, and we're being led by a government who, I would say, okay, I don't want to get myself into trouble by language, but I would say who do not give a care in the world. Let me say it that way.
I will move to the next story.
I'm biting my tongue there. Oh gosh, biting it so much.
All right, but one more question on that one. Do you feel like other countries have a clear plan on this issue of energy? And do you see us getting there, the UK getting there anytime soon?
I do feel that Amber Energies have a well thought out plan. I mean, if you look at what's happening in the UK, I think at this stage it's not a very high bar. We have quite a low bar, to be honest. So I think it's very easy for any other country to exceed that bar, even by a fraction. It's going to be very easy. So we've set the bar very low. And then also in terms of us actually getting to that stage, I'm worried not with this government, and that's due to their priorities, their mindset, and the community that they choose to help and those that they don't, which I feel that they consistently advocate for the well-off and privileged, their cronies in government, awarding them contracts and supporting them more than they would those working class and those in poverty. So I'm worried. I want us to get there. I want us to get to that point for the sake of the fact that we are in serious, dire circumstances. You want them to get it right. But at the same time, you're also worried that it won't be right under this current government with their mindset and their right-wing policies. So I'm really worried about that.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Call for Kwasi Kwarteng to refuse golden handshake. SNP MP David Linden has written to former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, urging him to refuse the ministerial severance payment after he served only 38 days in office. By law, any minister is entitled to a quarter of their annual salary if they are not given a new role within 3 weeks of being removed from post, and Kwasi Kwarteng's severance payment could be around 16,876 pounds, a quarter of 67,505 pounds, despite him being the second shortest serving chancellor in history. The Glasgow East MP has urged the former finance chief to do the right thing and refuse the acceptance of the ministerial severance payment, as households across the country struggle to make ends meet during the Tory-made cost of living crisis. Commenting, David Linden, MP, said Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget caused untold damage to the finances and livelihoods of my constituencies in Glasgow, many of whom were already living in a breadline before this disastrous statement spooked the market, tanked the pound, put pensions at risk, and sent mortgage payments through the roof. Given that he served in the Treasury for just 38 days and was sacked for literally trashing the economy, it would be wrong for him to accept the ministerial severance payment, which would be more than double than what he actually earned while Chancellor, he said. Right, Fatima, what is the right thing to do here? Take the money and go home, or give it back, refuse to take it?
I would never, in this circumstance, advocate for anyone to take money in the contemporary state of affairs that we're facing. I mean, this is someone who passed policies, the mini budget, which had a significant impact on people to the point that they even had to U-turn on it because of how disastrous it was. I don't think he should be accepting that severance payment because I feel it's a slap in the face for many people who are struggling. In fact, I feel he should refuse it, and then that money should be donated instead back to the public purse or to some charities that can help people who are struggling. That's the simple fact of it. And I think it would be a shame. He should be made to feel ashamed if he accepts that money for a job, for a role that he's barely been in and has been disastrous from beginning to end.
Right, let's wait and see what the results will be. Right, Dartford crossing blocked by Just Stop Oil protesters for second day. A raised platform has been brought in by police officers after the Dartford crossing remained blocked by two Just Stop Oil protesters for the second day in a row. Essex police said the platform would allow specialists to work at height on the Queen Elizabeth II bridge, which links Kent and Essex, and continue meaningful engagement with the two climbers. Chief Simon Anslow said in a tweet from the force, the two people who remain at height on the bridge have put themselves in danger. As a result, we and our emergency services face a considerable challenge. Our priority is to keep our country moving, but we also have a duty of care to the two people, as well as those who may be involved in any resolution at height. He added, I know the situation is incredibly frustrating, but we are doing everything possible to resolve the situation as quickly and as safely as possible. The bridge was closed after it was scaled by two climbers from the group, whose demands include that the government holds all new oil and gas licenses and consents. The closure of the Major Roads Bridge caused delays of 2 hours during rush hour on Monday, with 6 miles of congestion on the anti-clockwise carriageway and 5 miles on the opposite direction, National Highway said. Just Stop Oil is understood to have further actions planned in London throughout October. Morgan Troland, 39, a bridge engineer from London said in a statement released by Just Stop Oil on Monday. As a professional civil engineer, each year, as I renew my registration, I commit to acting within our code of ethics, which requires me to safeguard human life and welfare of the environment. The A282 Dartford crossing is the only way to cross the Thames east of London by road, with a 1.7-mile southbound bridge and two 0.8 miles northbound tunnels linking Essex and Kent. The A282 also connects directly at both ends with the M25 London Orbital motorway. So, Fatima, we've been seeing so many protesters, climate change protesters come out demonstrating in different ways. Those are two of them hanging over a bridge, on a bridge. We've had the ones in the museum sticking themselves with glue and so many others. And a couple of months ago in Aberdeen, we had some protesters who came, and they had a peaceful protest. All of them are saying we're not harming, but we want to bring these issues out. Do you think they're being heard? Do you think they're concerned, they're worried, they're scared of what other people are not seeing?
I mean, I'm a huge fan of protests. I'll be one of the first people at many protests, to be honest. But then we also need to think about the meaning and effectiveness of protests. If you're going to protest and it's designed in a way to severely disrupt people into annoyance, is that going to win people over to your cause or just even annoy them even further? Are you going to lose the support you already have? Because I think what they did at that bridge, I don't think sends a very strong message about their protests. I just saw it just having significant disruptions to people. I don't see anyone looking at that and going, oh no, I'm late for work, but I'm going to support them because they've done something that I totally get what message they're saying. People are not going to see it past the annoyance and the hardship that they've put them through that day. There's a method to protesting, and I feel some people don't think about the perception their protests can gain. Does it actually help or hinder the cause? Because some protests can massively hinder causes. I mean, the Van Gogh painting, I think I forgot what they threw on it. You'll have
It
to
was
remind me.
tomato soup.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, that worked. It didn't significantly hurt people. It didn't disrupt people. It wasn't a very important painting. However, it was something that could be rectified. It was something that could be fixed. It didn't hurt people. It didn't disrupt people. And the message why they were doing that got clear. So whilst it was not ideal for protesting, it wasn't a significant disruption such as what happened on the bridge, which I felt was doing more harm to the cause, in all honesty. Because if it was me, I would be totally put off by that, to be honest. And then when it comes to the issue that they're protesting and the message they're trying to get across, when it comes to stopping production, like, we're all trying to move away from oil because A, it's not sustainable, and B, we really need to think about the climate. But then I feel the most reasonable and economical way to do that is through a just transition. We need to have a just transition. It's not going to help anyone for us to put an immediate stop to it. We need to transition people, transition jobs, transition skills, transition what the reliance of oil. We need to move away from that in stages because it's not going to work sustainably or economically for anyone to put an immediate stop to something overnight. That can never happen. And I feel that it's a very unreasonable request to make of people. And what's going to happen then? What other alternatives have we set up in that process to be able to keep going? So I think that some of these protests are not very well thought out about, in fact, the way the world functions in particular. So a just transition is happening. We are moving away from oil, but I feel that the methods sometimes employed, I feel they're too drastic and unreasonable and not economical or sustainable at all. And I don't agree with that bridge protest, but I do agree with the Van Gogh one because I felt that was handled well, but not the bridge one. I felt that was careless and off-putting and dangerous, frankly.
Okay. MP says Chinese diplomat involved in violence at Manchester consulate. one of China's most senior diplomats in the UK, was involved in the violence against pro-democracy protesters at the Manchester consulate, an MP had said. Alicia Kearns, the Conservative MP for Rutland and Melton, told the House of Commons that Beijing's consul general in Manchester, Zhang Shuyun, was seen ripping down posters after a Hong Kong campaigner was attacked on Sunday. Footage posted online show a person believed to be Zheng, a veteran Chinese Communist Party CCP official, kicking down a poster and pulling a protester's hair, who was then dragged inside the consulate grounds and beaten. Ms. Kantz, chair of the Common Foreign Affairs Committee, said the violence was a chilling escalation of China's crackdown on pro-democracy protests. She called for those involved in the beating to be prosecuted or expelled from the UK within a week. Alicia Kantz said, "We cannot allow the CCP to import their beating of protesters, their silencing of free speech, and their failure to allow time and time again protesters on British soil. This is a chilling escalation. It is understood that some of the alleged assailants have been identified by the police and are likely to have diplomatic immunity, which means they cannot be arrested or prosecuted by UK authorities." On Tuesday, Greater Manchester Police were taking statements from many those involved in the violence. Responding to an urgent question in the Commons on Tuesday, the Foreign Office Minister, Jess Norman, said the government was extremely concerned about the incident. Mr. Norman said the House will know His Majesty's government is extremely concerned at the apparent scene of violence at the consulate of the People's Republic of China in Manchester on Sunday afternoon. Greater Manchester Police said on Monday that men linked to the consulate dragged the protester through its gates by force before attacking him violently. This is a sad case, and you know, the UK believes in freedom of speech and protesting, and you know, this happening on here, and you know, the protection these people are having. What do you think? This says to the UK government, if they've tabled it and they still can't do anything. They can't prosecute or send the person back or the people involved back.
I think I did read somewhere that understanding diplomatic immunity is something that's adhered to globally. So even our diplomats in foreign countries would have the same protections. It's there to protect in relationships between countries and to protect the diplomats there as well, who are very vulnerable and open to harm, especially in particular because they're in a foreign country and they're there for political reasons, to be honest, let's be real. In terms of, it just depends how this develops, because I'm sure there are avenues to consider evacuating them from the country if this develops into full-blown diplomatic altercations that could be harmful for the relationship of both countries. So I think there are avenues to explore there. And then in terms of right to protest, absolutely. This country respects the right to protest, well, as far as we are fighting for it, because if we've seen the recent bill that has been going through Parliament on that would literally threaten our right to protest. I think it's the rights bill that would literally threaten our right to protest. We need to protect that. But as it stands, this country, we are a nation of protesters. We're not the only country or within Europe or outside Europe that protests to get our voice heard and to protest for change. And we would want to protect that, absolutely, but it becomes tricky when it comes to issues of diplomacy, because that is adhered to globally. So I can't really say I know much of it, but I'm watching closely to see how this story develops, because it's something that, to be honest, I might learn from as well, in all honesty.
All right. Concerns raised over the process in case of 11 Albanians flown out of UK. Concerns have been raised about a group of 11 Albanians flown out of the UK soon after arriving in small boats, despite a government undertaking not to fast track Albanian nationals. Last month, the Home Office was forced to concede that it did not have the right to do so after earlier claims from former Home Secretary Priti Patel that the UK could quickly return asylum seekers who arrived in the UK and made spurious claims. The Albanians are thought to have arrived in the UK last week and were taken from Manston in Ramsgate, where the Home Office processes small boat arrivals, and Stansted Airport, from where they were put in a plane back to Albania on Wednesday. It is thought to be the first time small boat arrivals have been put on a plane directly from Manston. Critics have described the incident as a case of zero notice removal, while a Home Office spokesperson said they could not comment on the flight for operational reasons. Government sources said nobody on the flight had an outstanding asylum claim. But non-government sources are reported to have said that the 11 Albanians were not given an opportunity to have their asylum claims considered before they were put on the plane. The incident involving the 11 Albanians is the latest to have caused concerns over Manston, a temporary tented site at an airfield designed to hold 1,000 small boat arrivals that reportedly has 3,000 on site currently, giving rise to conditions described as a nightmare by one of those working at the site. Some people are being held for longer than 5-day time limit on the site, including unaccompanied children. Fatima, these are families, children, and it could be anybody, held in such situation, in conditions, and in such uncertainty, fleeing from wherever they're coming from, and then they land here, and it's even worse than the whole process of getting there.
Yeah, to first of all pick up on what you said about the government source saying that none of them have an outstanding claim, I think that's very sneaky of them, because in the first instance you'd asked was any of their claims heard in the first place for them to even have an outstanding claim. So that's very sneaky and tricky of them, to be honest. And we sadly have one of the most inhumane, backward thinking asylum and immigration policies, despite signing up to international treaties and recognizing that as countries we have a moral and international obligation to accept asylum seekers and refugees and hear their claims. So it's an affront to human rights for us to behave in such a manner. And whether or not it's legal, I mean, if it's illegal, then an independent investigation needs to be heard into what's been going on. And if it's legal, I'm even more worried about how inhumane we could be to even enshrine such actions in law. So it's really awful to see these situations happening. I believe it's very hostile, and under this current UK government, and Scotland has a very different outlook when it comes to asylum and immigration, and asylum and refugees and immigration in general. We have a very different outlook. And we have always made it clear that we distance ourselves from the rhetoric that's coming out of Westminster and the current Conservative government. And the fact that we have to work so hard and basically day in and day out to distance ourselves from it just speaks to the impact and negative effect this rhetoric has, that we want to stay far away from it as much as possible, because it is frankly inhumane. I know we say this word so many times, but it is really, really inhumane what's going on. It makes absolutely no sense when it comes to our morals and our obligations for us to behave in such a manner. And it could be any one of us, as you mentioned. It could be any one of us in this situation. It could be families, it could be friends, it could be anyone we know. And for us to behave in this manner is frankly selfish.
Moving on, Iranian schoolgirl beaten to death for refusing to sing pro-regime song. Another schoolgirl has been reportedly been killed by the Iranian security service after she was beaten in her classroom for refusing to sing a pro-regime song when her school was raided last week, sparking further protests across the country this weekend. According to the Coordinating Council of Iranian Teachers Trade Association, 16-year-old Asra Panahi died after security forces raided the Shahid Girls High School in Ardabil on 13th of October and demanded a group of girls to sing an anthem that praised Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. When they refused, security forces beat the pupils, leading to a number of girls being taken to hospital and others arrested. On Friday, Nahi reportedly died in hospital of injuries sustained at the school. Iranian officials denied that its security forces were responsible and claimed she died from a congenital heart condition. Schoolgirls have emerged as a powerful force after videos went viral of classrooms of pupils waving their hijabs in the air, taking down pictures of Iranian supreme leaders and shouting anti-regime slogans in support of Mahsa Amini, the 22-year-old woman who died after being detained by Iranian morality police for not wearing her hijab correctly in August. News from Patnahi's death has further mobilized schoolgirls across the country to organize and join protests over the weekend. Another story of another girl, killed from, people wanting more power and to just suppress, especially girls. What do you make of this story today, Fatima?
Well, first of all, we actually recently passed a motion through conference. I co-wrote it with my wonderful colleague, Councillor Rosa Saleh, on condemning the actions of the Iran government, because technically their behaviour is femicide, killing women because they're women and because they feel that they can exert that power over women. It's frankly an appalling abuse of human rights. It has no justification on any grounds at all. And it's simply violence, male violence against women. That's the full story of it. Simply male violence against women. Iran has been in a situation where, since the 1930s, at first, the previous regime banned women from wearing headscarves. And now the current regime, from the 1970s, have forced women to wear hijabs. So this is a country where women have had no say. They've had their dressing, strict dress codes imposed on them, dictated to by them. And they have been on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Cover your hair, don't cover your hair. It just goes to show the lack of freedom and the clear oppression and suppression that goes on when it comes to women's rights in Iran. That's the reason why these protests, we're seeing women, life, freedom being chanted loud and clear on the streets for everyone to hear. And these women are being supported by a diverse group of people, men, women. Even the riot police were captured to have joined in supporting these women and the protesters against this awful, brutal, vile Iran regime. And the sad case as well is that women all over the world, globally, are fighting for the right to bodily autonomy. It's the male patriarchy, it's the patriarchy that we're fighting here. It's male violence against women that we're fighting here. I mentioned in my speech in conference that Sarah Everard and Sabina Nessa were murdered simply for walking home the same way that it was male violence that's to blame, not for the fact that they were walking home alone. It's male violence. They should be able to make it from A to B alone in the dark without any fear of having lost their lives on the way. The same thing with Massa. She should not have been in a situation where she was arrested in the first place simply because she is not wearing what was dictated to her. She should be able to wear whatever she wants, and that should not be controlled by any one being or any one man at all. So what we're seeing is a clear affront to human rights. It's happening in Iran and Middle East, and we cannot ignore it happening here in Europe as well. I mean, in France, Denmark, we're seeing women banned from wearing face coverings and the hijab as well. I mean, one of my colleagues as well, Callum, clearly mentioned that we're in a dire situation where a Muslim woman could be walking on the street, have her hijab pulled off her head, but then can't go to court to testify against her attacker because having that hijab on her head would be a clear violation of that. It's just about control. What we're seeing is control over women and their rights and freedoms suppressed. And our conference, the SNP, have made it very clear, loud and clear, that we stand against the Iran regime and we stand in solidarity with protesters and women globally who are fighting for their basic human rights. Some are fighting for their basic human rights, which is a sad state of affairs, and we need to question how we even got to this stage. It's toxic patriarchy, it's male violence against women, and that's the only way we can explain it. I mean, I can go on, but I'm also way out of time, but I've been following this very closely. Young women are being attacked, girls are being attacked, children are being attacked for this supposed violation of imposed dressing. And as I said before, I can't stress it enough, there is no justification for this or for killing anyone.
And we've seen, unity and solidarity, expressed by people from all over the world. And, my only hope would be to see, this kind of things end, especially for Iran, because now, that's not the first, the second, or the third person dying just because of rules on women.
Yeah. No, 100%, absolutely. I mean, we have a long way to go. We've come a long way, but that should not distract us from the situation where we have a long way to go. I mean, one of the Sustainable Development Goals, I think Goal 3 is gender equality everywhere, tackling gender inequality. That should be our goal. Iran has signed up to these international conventions, and countries like Iran or anywhere, even France, where they're basically banning women's rights from wearing the hijab, should all be held accountable for these actions that they're having, because it goes against the very basic fundamental foundations of human rights for all, human rights for women, for tackling gender inequality. So we do have a long way to go in a world where we're still seeing these gross violations of human rights and suppression of freedom and values. I mean, many people are finding themselves in a situation where they don't have the freedom to simply live their life they have reason to value. It becomes valueless because it's being controlled to such an awful extent, to the point that you can't even participate fully in public life as you should. So there's a lot to unpack there. We cannot remain complacent. We cannot pretend that just because we've come a long way. I mean, women only gained their votes to the right to vote in this country in the early 20th century. I mean, that is a disgrace that women weren't able to vote up until then. And even then, it was just some women who gained the right. It was mainly the upper class women and those who owned property. It wasn't all women. So we have a long way to go. And I hope, maybe not in my lifetime, but I certainly hope that, I mean, we still have a long way to go, so I can't say my lifetime, but I think everyone should work as hard as they can to make it as if it will happen in their lifetime. We need to put in all our effort. We cannot sleep on this, because we're in a situation where we're seeing missing women. It's this theory coined by Amartya Sen called the missing women. Basically, you've got women who are missing, essentially missing. Their voices are missing. Their lives have been cut short because of violence against women.
Yeah.
So these are, I mean, there's serious consequences. It's a global, to be honest, it's endemic, and there's so many words and adjectives I can use here. I can go on all day, I said, but yeah, let me not also repeat myself in so many occasions with different words, but there's so much to say on this.
Yeah, let's hope in the near future, in our lifetime, that can happen. Yeah,
I would hope so. Yeah.
A new approach for fairer work. Deputy First Minister John Sweeney has said a new single rate for the national minimum wage to reflect the increased cost of living and more effective employment law to protect workers' rights underpin plans to build a fairer labour market in an independent Scotland. Following publication of the paper Building a New Scotland, a Stronger Economy with Independence, Mr. Sweeney said the power of independence would allow the Scottish Government to build a fairer, more equal future for all workers. This includes new measures to improve access to flexible working and better industrial relations. Deputy First Minister John Sweeney added that improving job security, wages, and work-life balance would be essential to delivering a more socially just Scotland. In contrast, he said that the UK labour market model has generated high income inequality while failing to drive productivity growth. Mr. Sweeney went on to say, compared to independent European countries similar to Scotland, the UK has a higher prevalence of low pay, a bigger gender pay gap, longer working hours, and significantly lower statutory sick pay. The Scottish Government says it is committed to fair work, but could go much further to strengthen that agenda in an independent Scotland with a legal framework that more effectively addresses the workplace challenges of the 21st century and would create an opportunity to redesign a system to better meet the needs of Scotland's workers and employers. Specific measures proposed in the Building a New Scotland economic paper include establishing a Scottish Fair Pay Commission to lead a new approach to setting a national minimum wage, working with employers, trade unions, and government. Improving pay and conditions with a single rate minimum wage for all age groups and better access to flexible work to help parents and carers. Repealing the UK Trade Union Act 2016 as part of developing an approach to industrial relation which suits both workers and employers, introducing a law to help workers organize cooperative pay buyouts or rescues when a business is up for sale or under threat. Legislating to support workers in precarious employment and banning the practice of staff being made redundant and rehire on reduced wages and conditions. Increasing transparency in pay reporting and data to address gender, ethnicity, and disability pay gaps and build on Scottish Government work to break down barriers to employment. The paper outlines how it would be easier for an independent Scotland to deal with labour market shock like the global financial crisis and pandemic. This sounds like a very good, this sounds like good conditions here, Fatima. I'm sure you're smiling seeing this.
Well, I mean, it's not even hard to think about this at all, and it's not even difficult to implement now. It's just the priorities of the current government. And people might think that in Scotland, those of us who support independence are making excuses for why things can't be done now. But they're being misled by the Westminster government and by those who are pro-union who think that Scotland has the powers to make these changes already. We don't. I mean, if we could, we would absolutely do it, but we don't have those powers, and we need those powers to be able to do that. We have a plan, it's feasible, it's logical, we're seeing many examples across Europe. It can be done. It's just the priorities of a right-wing conservative government who, as I mentioned before, are more interested in lining the pockets of their cronies and have misplaced priorities in who they support. I'm in favour of the real living wage. I mean, like the fundamentals of the triple lock for pensions, where it's in line with 2.5% pension, it's in line with inflation. Real living wage should be in line with all these values as well. It should be going up with inflation. It should be going up with changing circumstances. These things should happen. Yeah. A well-being economy is something that we aspire to in Scotland, and we're working on that now with the powers that we have. But with the full powers, we have countless examples of the sort of well-being economy we could build. I mean, we don't even need to look as far as Finland, as Switzerland, and see what they're doing already. I mean, a healthy workforce is a happy workforce. Yeah. I mean, these are easy. These are easy solutions, but can't be done because we don't have the powers to do so. And I look forward to the day that we're independent so that we can realize a better future for all. That's fair.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Fatima, for joining us today. And it's a pleasure to have you
A
here.
pleasure.
Right. Well, that's it for this evening. Before I go, I just want to remind you that Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programs will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programs. From me and everybody at Broadcasting Scotland, it's good night and thank you for watching.